Hey there, www.andrewmarkmusic.com. This is a Riffvlog on structural multiculturalism. I believe I coined the term in the first video of my What Should a Climate Emergency Look Like? And I don't know if there's anybody viewing things this way. It might be unique to my thought processes, but I sort of described it as the structural aspect to cultural Marxism. So that's why I've called it structural multiculturalism. So I guess some definitions here. Cultural Marxism is the idea that the teachings of Karl Marx initially were based on the economic order, and 100 years later, especially post-World War II, as societies became wealthy on the backs of war and death, the academies brought in stability to their professors' tenure, and the focus went away from economics to identity. So the focus of Marxism became one of identity politics. So that's the general idea of Marxist multiculturalism. But that didn't happen in a vacuum. That also happened with, the rise of or the reemergence of city-states. If we think of, Babylon as one of the original city-states, now the major cities of the world have become city-states under various ideologies like eco-modernism, things like that. But I see it more as the Rockefeller legacy of fossil fuels, and how they drove everybody into the big cities away from agrarian living. And so there's what I said in that video is you could take main thoroughfares in most any city of the world, and you'll see like Mack trucks, like big huge 18-wheelers with a little granny on a bicycle on the side of the road navigating all of this. You'll see a mother with a kid on a bike, going down major streets. It's truly insane, and I've dubbed this structural multiculturalism. And in this particular video, I'm gonna riff on the idea of alleys. So I'm going to put a picture of one of the Vancouver alleys in my blog. So maybe this should have been called structural multiculturalism bracketed alleys. And the first thing that I should make a demarcation on is the difference between commercial alley and residential alley. And what I'm talking about here, what I'm suggesting here, is strictly for the residential alleys. So that's basically going to be the theme of this blog. I'll have to back up here a little bit. So we have, in the last 100 years, this massive corporate infrastructure of reemergent city-states that displaced agrarian civilization. But what it also did is it threw a wrench into hundreds of thousands of years of evolution and how nature put all the various gene pools in certain areas of the earth. And that was a very slow process of natural selection over time. But what the billionaire oligarchs have done is they've totally upended the natural flow of evolution. And because another pillar of this whole system is usury and the economics of usury. That was the motivation to throw everybody into the nation states, so that they could just get a cut of the vig of every transaction anybody does anywhere. It was also likely the reason, for the destruction of Christian culture, so that they could get a cut of female income. But I'm not going to go into that aspect of it. The main point of it is that the wisdom, if there was wisdom in evolution, it's been upended by the oligarchs under what I call structural multiculturalism. So the end result of it is now we're all racist. And there's no cause. If you go to the mainstream media today, there's no cause for racism. Where just the cause is racism. So that's an interesting narrative. There's no looking at fundamental underlying reasons of why people would become hostile to other gene pools. It's just totally omitted from the narrative. So how convenient. Again, that goes to who's controlling the narrative today. Well, the cultural Marxists are. So it's identity politics, and they don't want to look at the issue of economics because it would point right to the other pillar of Marxism, which is Rockefeller usury, and we can't have anybody talking about that. So there's a duplicity going on that's is quite nasty, and the problem with the usurious side of the coin is it's entirely unsustainable. The end result of the structure of economics is what I call economic fascism. So the neoliberal order, which was the fusion of usury with the corporate nation state, or usury with corporations who bought out the political system. This is best called soft fascism, or what I call economic fascism. And they've plied their trade in every country in the world. I have another saying for it, is that they're systems disruptors. So they go in and they disrupt living systems, life systems. So okay, that's basically laying some groundwork here. So we have basically two streams of overarching control on the structural level: usury and fossil fuels, that created this monolithic corporate city-state, where they're trying to put everybody in and manage through a 5G network. But what I want to talk about here is the idea of alleys and how they could be repurposed. In the first video on what should a climate emergency look like, I talked about that it's no accident that there are no streets in major cities that are like bicycle only streets, where the real estate market under a free market would have had people that wanted to buy that house because they live on a bicycle street. Well, this of course it cannot happen under structural multiculturalism, because everybody's just thrown in with no thought about any kind of healthy life. The only concern is the profit of the billionaire oligarchs who are running this, and they don't care about anything other than that. That is it. That's the end of what they care about. One of the things that comes along with that is turning homes into speculative ventures, or what's called rent-seeking, economic rents. And this is definitely a glitch in the matrix. It should have never have been allowed to have happened within any Christian culture. Should have never. So you can take away one thing from that any healthy Christian culture was co-opted by these people. It doesn't exist. Capitalism and Christianity are it's not impossible. It's not possible for them to mix. So when you see capitalists who are when you see Christians who are promoting capitalism, you know that they're agents. It's not possible to have the Antichrist usury system be representative of healthy Christians. So we'll get that right off the table there. But one of the things that's implied when it comes to usurious real estate is just, if you take Vancouver and British Columbia where I live, it's just there's just not enough land for everybody to have a basic living space as a birthright. Like I've suggested 250 square feet. In the early days of distributism, they were saying, well, Christians should have 3 acres of land as a birthright, but those are arbitrary. I say 250 square feet today, but according to the structural multiculturalism, there's just not enough land for this. So the end result of that, in places like Los Angeles, there's hundreds of thousands of people living on the streets. In Vancouver, where I live, there's tens of thousands. Although, in the last 10 years, one of the legacies of the Rockefellers is the pharmaceutical giants, and they've been practicing genocide against the marginalized people. So it is a form of collective mass murder. Obviously, it benefits them because they control the political structure, and then you don't have to pay social services to dead people, right? So it is a form of genocide. I'm thoroughly convinced of that, and really nothing's been done about it. So the actual homeless numbers in the city where I live has gone down, but it hasn't gone down for a good reason. And the other element of what's happened there is gentrification. So the massive amounts of homeless people in Vancouver have been displaced out into the suburbs. I'm not going to touch on that too much, but you have all these alleys in Vancouver that are strictly residential, and I'll link a picture of it to show what I mean in my blog. And right now, they're being used for in a way that puts into effect what I call atomic noise bombs. So the alleys now have become atomic noise bombs by the corporate waste management system. And of course, most of this consumer waste is unnecessary. You don't need this kind of waste. It all comes part and parcel of the structural multiculturalism, because you are a consumer and your true identity is to be a debt slave. So it's a total. I live. My apartment is on a back alley, and the noise levels break the law. But these people practice lawlessness. They don't care about laws, or the only laws they care about are the toxic laws that they put in place, which, feed their pockets. You've got all kinds of people out there at 1, 2, 3 all night long, going through all the recycling things, like smashing bottles. Some of them are drunk, yelling and screaming. Some of them are mentally ill. So the back alleys are a nightmare right now, and they have, as the picture shows, they're just being used for the Rockefeller parking legacy, of cars being parked there. And what I'm suggesting here is that they could be repurposed and put to a better use. And all those homeless people, they could be living in these residential back alleys in tiny homes, used for van life. These back alleys could be used for walking and bicycling only. So you could have, like, almost on every street, north and south, in a city like Vancouver, you could have a massive infrastructure of walking and cycling routes that are ubiquitous. They're everywhere, with people living in tiny houses and doing gardening and It could be a, a whole new way to restructure the city in a way that's earth friendly, people friendly, um, and that's what I'm suggesting. But because the mafia controls this whole system, they control politics. They actually, as Tony Soprano knew, they control the waste systems, and then they go zero waste. It's a complete joke. There's never been more waste. It's corporate greenwashing by the mafia, and yeah, and of course we could never have this idea happen because it would take away from that other arm, which is the legacy of the Rockefellers, which is, well, we've got to have a cut of your vig. If you want a place to live, you got to pay us. And in my 4 pillars of the New Earth Commons, I've said that the way to implement a human right, 250 square feet of land for every single person, is through public banking currency. So the democratization of currency needs to be concomitant with this, juxtaposed to repurposing the alleys for truly green living, permaculture alleys, bicycles, walking. It would end homelessness. It would end homelessness overnight. It would deconstruct the social welfare state. You would not need the amount of money spent on welfare that is now, which is all just toxic control to keep people in dire poverty. That's no accident, the way they structured this. So yeah, you could totally repurpose the back alleys in a way that would be healthy and constructive. I would even say that I've suggested in the 4 pillars of New Earth Commons that the cost of healthcare would go way down because everybody would have a home as a birthright. And we can't have it because of this structural multiculturalism, this monolithic greed of the archons who want a cut of every transaction that any human does anywhere. And yeah, this is not going to end well. Of course, they have their Agenda 21 and the 5G 2030 scenario, and they'll have you believe that this is all being done through via and through materialist ideologies. As a Christian Gnostic, I believe that's false. I believe that it's evil archons, what I call Nephilim archon spooks, who are doing this. These are the people that populate the top of the pyramid and are entirely human-like. We cannot tell the difference between a true human and these Nephilim archon spooks who are robbing civilization for their benefit and their debauchery. But that is pure metaphysical speculation. The true humans could never prove this because they control everything. They would have to reveal themselves. I've said that the best way to sort of understand what I'm saying here is to watch the TV series Westworld as a loose analogy, not to be taken too literally, but you get the idea that the administrators of Westworld go into the park and interact with the hosts, and you cannot tell the difference between the host and the administrators. So the administrators of this Westworld are the Nephilim Archon spooks, and we are not living in a meaningless, flat, materialistic universe. We actually come from higher spiritual dimensions, and we are trapped here by the archons, and we are the prisoners and fast becoming enslaved at an unprecedented scale. If people like me put out good ideas like this, they're totally buried by the algorithms. These people control all the mainstream media. So you'll notice right now with this virus, the mainstream, it was all propagated by the mainstream media. And this shift from the virus to "you're a racist" as a narrative just came out of the blue. And what that does, it controls all the narratives so that people can't talk about the real issues, which are fundamentally economic in nature. And we can't talk about them because, we might have to say quantum woo. Um, so that's the real agenda behind this. It's all about diversion. And we can't talk about the worldwide system of usury that's been put in place. Now, usury I define as in economics, you have to create something of value. You have to create a widget. And, capitalism, when it does work, the person who creates the widget owns the means of production and they create something of value for society. But what usury does is, and the Christians understood this, is it takes money itself and it wants to make money with money through speculation and every other kind of grift imaginable and economic rents. This is all very destructive for society. And will always end up in disaster. And this is where we're at today, and we're not allowed to talk about it. There are ways out of this, but we're not going to get the good ways out of it because this didn't happen in a random universe. There's an agenda behind this, and the agenda behind this particular part of this story has to do with a one world currency with rule coming out of Yahweh taking human form as the Messiah, and the world will be run under the control of the Sanhedrin Council, and that will be the end of Christendom upon the earth, because you will not be allowed to be a Christian under that worldview. Now, the truth about Christianity is irrelevant in that context. If you say, no matter what sect of the 33,000 Christians you are, if you suggest that Jesus is God, you will be put to death. And because you're not, the first rule of the Noahide laws is you cannot talk against Yahweh, and saying that Jesus is God, no matter which version it is. I'm a Christian Gnostic. I believe that Jesus is God, different than in the way that the Catholic Church proclaims, but for this one world system, it will be enough to get me killed. And who gets to live during that reign? Well, the people that will submit to the Messiah, Yahweh, in human form, who is actually Baal. This is Baal worship, and this is why they have the bull on Wall Street, right? This is, and there's a little something off about the religion of Judaism, and that the only historical record there are for Hebrews in Egypt are the Hykso Pharaoh kings. So the Jews in Egypt were the pharaohs. And so they were certainly, there's no evidence whatsoever that they were slaves there. So we're mired in duplicity, we're mired in deception. Regardless, no matter what the result, no matter what the truth of history, we can easily tell today they are not victims, they are perpetrators today. And that's all we need to know. Okay, so, and that's in part why we cannot have 250 square feet as a birthright, because they wouldn't be able to get a cut of it. They wouldn't be able to get a cut of the vig of just humanity's most basic needs of housing, food, education, and healthcare. We can see that within what I call academia today, your education now comes with a lifetime of debt. That's not random. That's not an accident. That's not evolution at work. That's economic Darwinism. That's these Nephilim Archon spooks imprisoning you. Okay, so I think I'll leave it at that. This was www.andrewmartinmusic.com, riffing on the idea of structural multiculturalism, and this one was called Alleys. Peace out.